A female CEO took her mute daughter to the park and froze when a homeless man made her speak for the first time. This changed his life forever. 4-year-old Lily hadn't spoken a single word in years, not since her father died. Evelyn had tried everything: doctors, therapists, specialists. Nothing worked. Then, one autumn afternoon, a homeless man with a carved wooden whistle sat beside them on a park bench. He hummed a simple lullaby, and suddenly, "Mama," the first word Lily had ever spoken. But here's what Evelyn couldn't understand. How did this stranger know the exact melody she used to sing to her daughter in private? As she digs deeper into Hank's mysterious past, their story explodes across social media. The headlines are brutal. Her board wants her gone. Then the police arrest Hank for a crime he didn't commit, and Lily stops speaking again. Now Evelyn faces an impossible choice: save her billion-dollar career or fight for a man the world has already forgotten. But when security footage reveals a shocking truth about that day in the park, everything changes. The real question isn't just how Hank knew that lullaby, it's what happens when the most powerful woman in the city goes to war for someone who has nothing left to lose. If you believe that one moment of kindness can change everything, hit subscribe for more incredible true stories. Drop a comment and let us know, where in the world are you watching this from? The October wind carried promises of winter through Madison Square Park, rustling the amber leaves that danced around Evelyn Hart's polished boots. She sat rigidly on the weathered bench, her charcoal wool coat pristine against the peeling green paint, a takeout coffee cooling in her manicured hands. 20 feet away, Lily perched on the edge of the fountain, with her stuffed brown dog clutched against her chest, watching the pigeons with the same silent intensity she brought to everything else in her 4-year-old world. Evelyn checked her phone for the third time in 10 minutes. The quarterly board meeting wasn't until tomorrow, but the numbers from Singapore needed review, and the merger documents required her signature by 5. Still, she stayed. These afternoon park visits had become their ritual, 30 minutes of shared silence before returning to their separate solitudes at home. A shadow fell across her peripheral vision. A man approached slowly, favoring his left leg, with a weathered golden retriever padding beside him on a frayed rope leash. His clothes hung loose and layered, the kind of careful arrangement that spoke of sleeping rough, but his movements held a strange gentleness. He carried a paper bag in one hand and something small and wooden in the other. The man, perhaps 50, with graying hair and kind eyes, settled onto the far end of Lily's fountain ledge, maintaining careful distance. His dog, an old thing with cloudy eyes and a graying muzzle, settled with a grateful sigh. The man pulled a sandwich from the bag, tore it in half, and offered a piece to his companion. "There you go, Sam," he said quietly. His voice carried the rough edges of someone who'd spent too many nights in the cold, but it held warmth. "Good boy." Lily's head turned slightly. She rarely acknowledged strangers, but something about this man's gentle presence seemed to catch her attention. The man noticed her watching and smiled, not the forced brightness adults often used with children, but something genuine and patient. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, carved wooden whistle, no bigger than his thumb. The surface was smooth from handling, etched with tiny birds in flight. He held it up to the light, examining it with the care of someone who understood the value of small, beautiful things. Then, so softly Evelyn almost missed it, he began to hum. The melody was simple, ancient, the kind of lullaby passed down through generations. But as the notes drifted across the autumn air, Evelyn's entire world tilted. She knew that song. She had sung those exact notes to Lily every night after her father died, when nightmares came and words wouldn't. It was their secret melody, their private comfort, something she had never shared with therapists or family or anyone. The man continued humming, his cracked voice honest and unashamed. He raised the whistle to his lips and played the same tune, the wooden instrument giving voice to the wordless ache of loss and hope intertwined. Lily stood up from the fountain's edge. Her small legs carried her closer to the man and his dog, her stuffed animal trailing behind her. She stopped just within arm's reach, her dark eyes wide with something Evelyn had not seen in months, curiosity mixed with trust. The man looked down at her with infinite patience. "You like music, little one?" he asked softly. He held out the whistle. "Want to try?" Lily's small hand reached out, her fingers curling around the smooth wood. She brought it to her lips, took a breath, and as the first pure note escaped into the autumn air, something shifted in her throat, her chest, her very being. "Mama." The word fell into the world like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything Evelyn thought she understood about silence and healing and the mysterious ways grace could arrive through the most unexpected messengers. Evelyn felt the city tilt, as if a secret seam had finally split. The elevator doors closed with a whisper, sealing Evelyn and Lily into their ascending metal cocoon. 37 floors to their penthouse, 37 floors for Evelyn to replay those impossible moments in the park. The wooden whistle lay warm in her palm, forgotten until now, its carved surface pressing against her skin like a brand. Lily had returned to her customary silence the moment they left the fountain, clutching her stuffed dog and gazing out the taxi window with the same distant expression she wore everywhere else. But something had shifted in her posture, a looseness in her shoulders that hadn't been there that morning. She had spoken. After 18 months of specialists and speech therapists, of gentle coaxing and expensive interventions, a homeless stranger with a carved whistle had unlocked what no professional could reach. In their marble-floored foyer, Evelyn helped Lily out of her coat while her mind churned through impossible questions. How did he know that melody? She had never hummed it anywhere but Lily's bedroom, never shared it with Dr. Morrison or the team of child psychologists who rotated through their lives with clipboards and theories. It was hers alone, born from the aching nights after James died when nothing else could soothe Lily's silent grief. She settled Lily at the kitchen counter with apple slices and crackers, then retreated to her home office. The files were all there, organized in neat manila folders, speech therapy reports, psychological evaluations, recommendations for residential treatment facilities. None of them had mentioned music. None of them had suggested that breakthrough might come from connection rather than clinical intervention. Her fingers found Dr. Morrison's number. The call went to voicemail. Office hours were over, but Evelyn left a message anyway, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "Janet, it's Evelyn Hart. Lily spoke today. Just one word, but please call me back." She hung up and stared at the whistle on her desk. The carved birds seemed to flutter in the lamplight, their tiny wings frozen in eternal flight. She picked it up and brought it to her lips, breathing softly across the opening. The note that emerged was pure and clear, nothing like the broken melody she hummed to herself in lonely moments. The sound of it sent her back to the park, to the patient kindness in the man's eyes, and the way Lily had trusted him instantly. Sam, he had called his dog. Such an ordinary name for such an extraordinary moment. By 9 o'clock, after Lily was asleep and the apartment had settled into its familiar quiet, Evelyn found herself pulling on her coat again. She told herself she was going for air, for a walk to clear her head before the board meeting tomorrow. But her feet carried her back to Madison Square Park, back to the fountain where miracles happened on October afternoons. The park after dark was different, populated by shadows and streetlight pools. A few dog walkers moved along the paths, and couples shared benches beneath the amber glow of old-fashioned lamps. But there was no sign of the man or his golden dog, no trace of the magic that had transformed their day. She walked the perimeter twice, then ventured toward the fountain. The vendor carts were shuttered, their owners gone home to families and warm dinners. She approached the hot dog stand where an older man was wiping down his equipment. "Excuse me," she said, her voice smaller than she intended. "There was a man here this afternoon, with a golden retriever. Do you know where I might find him?" The vendor looked up, studying her expensive coat and polished shoes. "Lady, there's lots of folks with dogs come through here. You lose something?" "In a way." She pulled out the whistle. "He gave this to my daughter. I wanted to thank him." The man's expression softened slightly. "Sounds like Hank, maybe. Comes around most days with that old dog of his. Quiet type, minds his business." Haven't seen him since afternoon, though. Hank. The name settled into her chest like a key finding its lock. Do you know where he stays? Could be anywhere. Shelters fill up fast, and some folks, they prefer the streets. The vendor clicked off his propane tank. He seems decent enough, but lady, you sure you want to go looking for trouble? Evelyn walked home slowly, her mind tracing new paths through familiar territory. In her pocket, the whistle caught the light from passing cars, and with each step, she felt herself crossing a line she hadn't known existed. Tomorrow's board meeting, the merger documents, the careful choreography of her corporate life, all of it seemed suddenly distant, as if viewed through the wrong end of a telescope. Near the park's edge, tied around a bench with careful loops of frayed twine, she found a small carved wooden feather. She untied it gently, holding it up to the streetlight. The craftsmanship was delicate, the same steady hand that had made Lily's whistle. A clue, an invitation, a doorway opening where none had been before. The underpass near the East River smelled of damp concrete and old rain. Evelyn picked her way carefully around puddles that reflected the harsh fluorescent lights, Lily's small hand warm in hers. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the curved walls, announcing their approach to anyone who might be listening. She found him tucked into an alcove behind a concrete pillar, Sam curled against his side like a golden comma. Hank looked up as they approached, his weathered face cycling through surprise, wariness, and something that might have been embarrassment. He rose slowly, brushing dust from his layered clothes with the automatic dignity of someone who had learned to carry himself with care despite circumstances. "Ma'am," he said simply, his voice the same gentle rasp she remembered from the park. His eyes found Lily, and his expression softened. "Hello there, little bird." Lily stepped closer, drawn by the same inexplicable trust she had shown at the fountain. Sam's tail gave a weak wag, and she crouched to pet the old dog's graying muzzle. "I wanted to thank you," Evelyn began, then stopped. The words felt inadequate. Corporate. She pulled the whistle from her pocket. "For this. For what you did." Hank's gaze flicked to the carved wood, then back to her face. "Wasn't doing anything special, just seemed like she might like the music. She hasn't spoken in 18 months. The admission came out more raw than she intended, not since her father died. I've tried everything, specialists, therapists, residential programs, nothing worked." Something shifted in Hank's expression, a recognition that ran deeper than sympathy. "Sometimes the quiet ones, they're just waiting for the right song," he said. "Had a little girl once, looked just like this one. Stubborn as anything, wouldn't say her colors or count her numbers for the fancy teachers. But she'd sing every nursery rhyme if you hummed the first few notes." "You taught children?" "Helper, mostly. Volunteer work at a community center in Queens. Kids with speech troubles, learning differences, that sort of thing." His hands moved as he spoke, steady and sure, despite the tremor of cold. "Learned that music goes places words can't always reach. Rhythm first, then sound, then meaning, like building a bridge from the inside out." Evelyn reached into her purse, her fingers finding the envelope she had prepared. "Please, let me help you. I can arrange housing, medical care, whatever you need." Hank's face closed off, the warmth draining from his eyes. "Not looking for charity, ma'am. Got my dignity, got my dog. That's enough." "It's not charity," Evelyn said quickly. "It's gratitude. You gave my daughter her voice back. That's worth more than money." "Your daughter found her own voice," Hank corrected gently. "Was always there, just needed permission to use it." He crouched down to Lily's level, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You say it when you want her. You say it when you know her." Lily looked at him with those dark, serious eyes, then turned to Evelyn. "Mama," she said, softer this time, like a promise rather than a surprise. The sound hit Evelyn like a physical force, buckling her knees with relief and joy and a grief she hadn't known she was carrying. Hank reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in newspaper, crackers, the kind children loved, slightly stale but carefully saved. "For the little bird," he said, offering them to Lily. "Music makes you hungry. Sam's tail thumped against the concrete as Lily settled beside him, sharing her crackers with careful solemnity. In that moment, under the harsh lights of the underpass, Evelyn saw past the circumstances to the man himself, the patience in his movements, the kindness that had survived whatever storms had brought him here. "There's a shelter program," she said carefully, "through my company's foundation. Clean beds, hot meals, no questions asked, just for one night, to start." Hank was quiet for a long time, his eyes on Lily feeding crackers to Sam. Finally, he nodded. "One night," he said, "for the dog as much as me. Winter's coming, and he's getting old for sleeping rough." Evelyn felt something shift in her chest, a door opening where none had been before. "I'll be back tomorrow," she promised. "Same time." As they walked back toward the street, Lily turned once to wave at Hank. He raised his hand in return, and Evelyn filed the moment away in her memory like proof of a miracle, evidence that grace still moved in the world through the most unexpected messengers. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a carefully orchestrated dance between hope and scrutiny. Each afternoon, Evelyn found herself drawn back to the park where Hank waited with his carved whistles and patient games. He would tap simple rhythms on the bench, and Lily would mirror them with her small hands. He hummed fragments of melodies, pausing to let her fill in the silence with tentative sounds that gradually shaped themselves into words. "Dog," she said on a Tuesday, pointing at Sam's graying muzzle. "Park," she whispered on Thursday, her voice gaining strength. By Friday, she managed a full sentence, "Sam is tired," observing the old retriever's afternoon nap with the solemnity of a weather report. Behind the scenes, Evelyn moved with the efficiency that had built her company. A phone call to Rosa Kim at Social Services secured Hank a bed at the downtown shelter. Another call arranged medical care for Sam, whose cloudy eyes and stiff joints spoke of years without veterinary attention. She used company resources carefully, channeling funds through established programs to avoid unwanted attention. But attention found them anyway. The trouble began with good intentions. Mrs. Chen, from the flower cart, started saving day-old pastries for Hank. The maintenance crew left extra blankets near his usual bench. A teenage intern from Evelyn's office, walking through the park during lunch break, snapped a photo of Lily sharing her sandwich with Sam and posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Sometimes magic happens in ordinary places." Within hours, the image had spread beyond the intern's modest following. Local parenting blogs picked it up, then lifestyle sites, then the morning news shows that fed on heartwarming content between segments about political chaos and economic uncertainty. The narrative wrote itself. Wealthy CEO's mute daughter healed by homeless man's kindness. Evelyn's phone began ringing before she reached her office Monday morning. Marcus Grant, her chief operating officer, intercepted her at the elevator with the tight smile he reserved for potential disasters. "We need to discuss the park situation," he said, steering her toward the executive conference room. "The board is concerned about the optics." "What optics?" Evelyn set down her briefcase with more force than necessary. "A man helped my daughter speak. That's not optics, Marcus. That's a miracle." "A homeless man with a criminal record," Marcus corrected, sliding a manila folder across the polished table. "Minor infractions, mostly. Public intoxication, trespassing, failure to appear for court dates. Nothing violent, but enough to raise questions about judgment." Evelyn opened the folder with reluctant fingers. The arrest sheet was brief, dated 3 years back, but the bureaucratic language couldn't capture the desperation that must have driven each infraction. "This is irrelevant." "The reporters won't think so." Channel 7 called this morning asking for comment on our unusual community outreach program. The Times is running a piece Wednesday about corporate responsibility and homeless advocacy. Through the conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows, Evelyn could see Madison Square Park, a postage stamp of green in the urban landscape. "Let them write their stories. We're not doing anything wrong. We're also not controlling the narrative," Marcus said. "I've drafted a statement, positioning this as part of our existing charitable initiatives. Clean, corporate, safe. I won't turn Hank into a case study." "Then you're willing to let speculation run wild? To have your personal life become tabloid fodder? Marcus leaned back in his leather chair. The quarterly reports come out next week. The merger with Consolidated depends on stability, predictability. Shareholders don't invest in companies whose CEOs make impulsive decisions about homeless individuals. That evening, as Evelyn helped Lily with her bath, the implications settled over her like cold water. The company employed over 3,000 people. The merger would secure their jobs for the next decade. Against that weight of responsibility, one man's dignity seemed almost selfish to protect. But then Lily looked up from her bath toys, water dripping from her dark hair, and said with perfect clarity, "Hank makes music with his hands." The words hung in the steamy air like notes from an unseen instrument. Evelyn wrapped her daughter in a towel, holding her close, and felt the familiar tug between the life she had built and the life that was calling to her from across the city, one carved whistle at a time. Outside their penthouse windows, the lights of Manhattan glittered like scattered stars, beautiful and distant and somehow insufficient against the memory of a golden dog's trusting eyes and the patient hands that had unlocked her daughter's voice. The call came at 6:30 on a rain-soaked Thursday morning, jarring Evelyn from the restless sleep that had become her norm. Rosa Kim's voice carried the weight of bad news across the crackling phone line. "They arrested Hank last night," she said without preamble. "Mistaken identity on a robbery at 7th and Broadway. A witness picked him out of a lineup, said he was certain." Evelyn was already reaching for her clothes, phone cradled against her shoulder. "That's impossible. He was at the shelter by 8. I checked with the night supervisor myself." "I know that. You know that. But the witness saw what he saw, and Hank fits the general description. Older, white male, layered clothing, moving with a limp." Rosa's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent too many nights navigating the gaps between justice and bureaucracy. "He's being held at the 23rd Precinct. No bail set yet." The rain followed Evelyn through the city, drumming against the taxi windows as she called her company's legal counsel. David Stern answered on the second ring, his corporate attorney's calm already calculating angles and liabilities. "Evelyn, I understand your concern, but getting involved in a criminal matter—" "He didn't do it," she interrupted, watching the precinct building emerge through the gray morning like a concrete fortress. "I need you to meet me downtown. Now." The police station smelled of burned coffee and institutional disinfectant. Evelyn sat in a plastic chair that had seen too many desperate families, while David spoke in measured tones to a desk sergeant whose expression suggested he had heard every story before. Through a reinforced window, she caught glimpses of men in orange jumpsuits being led down fluorescent-lit corridors. "The witness is adamant," the sergeant explained, shuffling through paperwork with practiced indifference. Said the suspect approached him outside the electronics store, demanded his wallet and phone. When the victim hesitated, the suspect threatened him with a piece of wood, some kind of carved stick. Evelyn's heart lurched. "A whistle? Could be." Victim said it looked handmade, possibly a weapon. The sergeant looked up from his files. "Your friend have a history of carrying carved objects?" Before she could answer, David placed a restraining hand on her arm. "My client won't be answering questions without proper representation for Mr. Donovan." 2 hours and countless forms later, they were finally allowed to see Hank. He sat in a gray interview room, smaller somehow in the harsh institutional light, Sam nowhere to be seen. His weathered hands rested flat on the metal table, and when he looked up at Evelyn, she saw something she hadn't expected, a deep, resigned tiredness that had nothing to do with the night's events. "They took Sam to animal control," were his first words, "said they couldn't hold him here." "We'll get him back," Evelyn promised, settling into the chair across from him. "And we'll get you out of here. This is all a mistake." Hank's smile was gentle and infinitely sad. "Maybe, maybe not. Witness seemed pretty sure it was me. Sometimes that's all it takes." "But you were at the shelter. There are records, witnesses. Been through this before, ma'am. Systems not built for folks like me. Guilty until proven innocent, and sometimes not even then." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved object. Somehow the guards had missed it, or perhaps They simply hadn't cared. It was a tiny wooden bird, no bigger than a thumb, with wings that seemed to flutter in the overhead light. He placed it carefully on the table between them. "For the little bird," he said quietly, "tell her this one's called Stay. You blow across the tail feathers, sounds like wind through leaves, helps when the quiet gets too loud." Through the reinforced glass, Evelyn could see officers moving with purposeful efficiency, processing the night's collection of human mistakes and misunderstandings. In this place, Hank was just another case number, another problem to be categorized and filed away. "You stayed," he said simply, his eyes holding hers across the scarred metal table. "Most folks, they disappear when trouble comes calling. But you stayed." The weight of those words settled over her like a benediction and a burden combined, carrying promises she wasn't sure she could keep. The headlines hit like a coordinated assault. CEO's homeless friend arrested for robbery. Corporate charity case turns criminal. When good intentions go wrong. The Evelyn Hart story. By Friday morning, Evelyn's phone buzzed with calls from reporters, board members, and stockholders whose voices carried the sharp edge of money threatened. The emergency board meeting convened at 10 o'clock in the 42nd floor conference room, where 15 executives sat around the mahogany table like a tribunal. Marcus had prepared a presentation, complete with slides showing declining stock prices and social media sentiment analysis. The numbers painted a stark picture: 3% drop in share value, hashtags trending toward scandal, major investors requesting clarification calls. "The optics are devastating," Marcus said, clicking to a slide showing newspaper headlines splashed across financial websites. "Our merger with Consolidated is built on trust and stability. This association with criminal activity threatens everything we've worked toward." Board member Patricia Hewitt leaned forward, her silver hair gleaming under the conference room lights. "Evelyn, we understand your personal investment in this situation, but the company employs 3,000 people. We have a fiduciary duty to our shareholders." "A man is sitting in jail for a crime he didn't commit," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "That should matter more than stock prices. Should it?" The question came from Robert Chen, the longest-serving board member whose quiet voice commanded attention. "We're not a charity, Evelyn. We're a corporation with responsibilities to thousands of families who depend on our success." The meeting stretched through the morning, each voice adding weight to the growing consensus. By noon, they had issued an ultimatum wrapped in corporate politeness. Distance the company from the homeless man situation or face a vote of no confidence. Evelyn accepted the terms with the hollow smile she had perfected through years of boardroom negotiations, knowing she was crossing a line that would change everything. She spent the afternoon in her office, staring out at the city that sprawled beneath her windows like a circuit board of lights and lives. Her resignation letter sat half-finished on her computer screen, cursor blinking against the incomplete sentence that would end the career she had built from nothing. The knock on her door came at 4 o'clock. A young man with a messenger bag and nervous energy introduced himself as Miguel Santos, a bike courier who had been making deliveries in the financial district the day of the robbery. "I saw the news," he said, pulling a small camera from his bag. "Dashcam footage from Tuesday night. I was picking up a package from the electronics store right when it happened. Your friend wasn't anywhere near the scene." The footage was grainy, time-stamped, and legally admissible. It showed a different man entirely, younger, moving without Hank's distinctive limp, threatening the victim with what appeared to be a metal pipe rather than carved wood. More importantly, it showed Hank 3 blocks away, sitting on a bench feeding crackers to Sam at the exact time of the robbery. Evelyn called Rosa Kim immediately, but the social worker's voice carried exhaustion and defeat. "It doesn't matter," Rosa said. "Hank disappeared from the shelter this morning. Didn't wait for the hearing, didn't tell anyone where he was going. Someone at the precinct must have leaked his name to the wrong people. Word is, there's an old enemy looking for him, someone from his past who heard about the arrest." That evening, Evelyn sat in Madison Square Park on the same bench where miracles had begun. The October air carried winter's promise, and the carved bird whistle lay warm in her palm. Lily hadn't spoken since the arrest, returning to the silence that had defined her world before Hank's gentle intervention. The park felt different now, emptier somehow despite the usual evening crowd of dog walkers and late commuters. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the news coverage, each headline a fresh wound. Her company's stock had recovered slightly, the board's confidence restored by her promise to handle the situation quietly. But as she sat in the gathering darkness, watching the fountain where her daughter had first found her voice, Evelyn felt the weight of compromise settling over her like dust. She had built an empire on making hard choices, on prioritizing the greater good over individual need. Yet here, surrounded by the city she had conquered, she felt smaller than she had in years. The truth existed now in digital form, time-stamped and irrefutable. Justice waited in a manila envelope on her kitchen counter, but the man who needed that justice had vanished into the vast anonymity of the city's forgotten places, and all her corporate power felt suddenly as fragile as carved wood in the face of forces she couldn't control or buy or negotiate away. The community center on East 14th Street had seen better decades, but its worn wooden floors and folding chairs carried the weight of 1,000 neighborhood meetings, custody hearings, and small-scale justice proceedings. Rosa Kim had arranged everything with the efficiency that had made her indispensable to 3 different social service agencies, contacting local news outlets, gathering witnesses, and somehow locating Hank in a homeless encampment near the Hudson River, where he had been hiding with Sam for the past week. Evelyn arrived early, her usual corporate armor replaced by simple black slacks and a white blouse that made her look less like a CEO and more like what she had become, a mother fighting for what was right. The dash cam footage sat in a manila envelope beside her purse, along with affidavits from the shelter's night supervisor and 3 residents who had played cards with Hank the evening of the robbery. The room filled slowly with an unlikely congregation. Mrs. Chen from the flower cart sat in the front row, her weathered hands folded around a thermos of tea. Miguel Santos, the bike courier, checked his camera equipment with nervous energy. A dozen shelter residents clustered near the back, their presence a testament to the quiet dignity Hank had maintained even in his lowest moments. Marcus entered just before the proceedings began, his expression unreadable as he took a seat near the middle of the room. Behind him, 3 board members sat with the careful neutrality of people watching their investments hang in the balance. When Hank walked through the double doors, escorted by Rosa and a legal aid attorney, the room fell silent. A week of hiding had hollowed his cheeks and deepened the lines around his eyes, but he moved with the same gentle steadiness Evelyn remembered. Sam padded beside him, his golden coat brushed clean, tail wagging tentatively at the familiar faces. The hearing proceeded with informal efficiency. Rosa presented the evidence methodically, the dash cam footage that showed Hank 3 blocks from the robbery, the shelter logs that documented his presence, the testimonies of residents who had shared their evening meal with him. The legal aid attorney spoke in measured tones about mistaken identity and the burden of proof. But it was Hank's own testimony that transformed the room. He stood without notes or preparation, his calloused hands steady on the back of his chair as he spoke directly to the assembled crowd and the cameras Rosa had arranged. "I spent 43 years teaching kids that their words mattered," he said, his voice carrying the authority of hard-won truth. "Lost that job when I lost my way after my daughter died in a car accident. Lost my house, lost my wife, lost most everything I thought made me who I was. But I never lost the part that knows how to listen to a child who needs to be heard." He looked directly at Evelyn, then at Lily, who sat quietly in the front row with her stuffed dog clutched against her chest. "This little girl taught me something I'd forgotten, that grace shows up in the most ordinary moments, and sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is just staying present when they're ready to speak." The footage played on a borrowed projector, its grainy images speaking louder than any testimony. The timestamps were clear, the location undeniable. When it finished, the room sat in the kind of silence that follows revelation. It was Lily who broke that silence. She stood up from her chair, walked past the rows of folding seats and gathered adults, and stopped directly in front of Hank. Looking up at him with those dark, serious eyes, she said in a voice that carried to every corner of the room, "Hank, stay." The words were not a request but a command, issued with the authority of someone who had learned the difference between abandonment and presence, between charity and dignity, between pity and love. Later, after the charges were formally dropped and the cameras had departed, Evelyn found Hank sitting on the community center's front steps. Sam stretched out beside him in a patch of late-afternoon sunlight. She approached slowly, carrying the resignation letter she had never submitted and a different kind of proposal, one that offered work instead of charity, partnership instead of pity. "We're starting a program," she said, settling beside him on the worn concrete. "Community workshops for kids with speech delays, music therapy, woodworking classes. It pays a living wage, comes with housing assistance, and Sam is more than welcome." Hank was quiet for a long moment, his fingers working at a piece of wood that would become another whistle, another gift for a child who needed to find their voice. "What made you change your mind about fighting for this?" Evelyn looked through the community center's windows, where Lily was showing other children how to hold Sam's carved whistle properly, her clear voice explaining the breathing technique that made the sweetest sounds. "She did," Evelyn said simply. "She reminded me that some things are worth more than keeping safe." As evening settled over the neighborhood, they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the ordinary miracle of children at play, knowing that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the smallest act of staying present when someone is finally ready to speak.